Welcome to Craft Chat Chronicles, the go-to podcast for tips on crafting best-selling fiction. Here at Craft Chat Chronicles, we bring you expert interviews, insights, and tips on writing, publishing, and marketing. For workshops, show notes, and more information, visit jdmyall.com.
On episode 10 of Craft Chat Chronicles, we have 2025 debut author Jamie D'Amato talking about her debut novel, The Good Vampire's Guide to Blood and Boyfriends, her debut experience, writing craft, and more.
I'm good. How are you?
What was your life like before you started writing?
Oh my gosh. Well, I started writing really, really young, so that's hard to say. Yeah, I mean, I guess I could say there was a time where I started to take writing more seriously, where I used to do it for fun, like all through, elementary school, middle school, high school. I mean, I started writing when I was like 6 or 7. I started loving books and wanting to write them. So I guess after high school is when I started taking it seriously as publishing, and wanting to like really hone my craft and push myself to, be writing the kind of books that I loved reading. So yeah, I guess before that, I mean, I just looked at writing differently versus like as a fun thing versus as a craft you really have to hone, and as something I wanted to, make money off of, hopefully, and do as like a business as well. But before writing, I mean, I really barely remember because I mean, there was a period before I started being an avid reader that I slightly remember, but I don't know. Everything changed once I started reading a lot more, I feel like, and that just became my personality and the thing that I loved.
What inspired you to want to become an author?
I think it was just being an avid reader that I loved books so much. And I loved stories of all sorts, not just books, but movies and video games and TV and everything. And so I was just really fascinated with like stories and the way they were told. And writing was the most accessible to me because you really just needed a notebook. It wasn't like filmmaking where you have to have equipment and a team. It was something that I could do on my own. So that was the one that I kind of latched onto creativity wise, was just books. And yeah, I think there were just lots of books that I really loved. And I was like, I want to do more of this. Like, I want to do that too. And I was always a very imaginative child. So, I had all sorts of things buzzing in my head. And I think it was like a wanting to express that in a way that I didn't always know how verbally. Mm-hmm. So the books and the stories became a way to like focus that energy. And yeah. So yeah, I think just reading a lot and wanting to do that too was really why.
Cool. Tell me about your publishing journey. How did you get your agent and all that good stuff?
Yeah. I have like the most average publishing journey ever, I feel like. The ideal, I think, as far as this was the first book I ever queried. Mm-hmm. I wrote one before that I like was starting to revise and then realized I kind of had leveled up past it and needed to write the next one. And then I wrote the next one, and that's my debut. So I queried for like 4 or 5 months, and I got my agent, and he was the only offer, but he was a dream agent. So I was super happy to go with him.
Who's your agent?
John Cusick at Folio. Okay. I was just flabbergasted because I totally didn't expect him to even respond, let alone be representing me. So I adore him. And then we didn't really do much revision together beforehand. I just sent some extra materials for the sub package and stuff, and we were on submission for about a month. Mm-hmm. And we got one offer, and then we had another person interested, and then one that failed at acquisitions. So mm-hmm. we ended up having an auction just with the 2 houses because we thought we were going to have 3. But so I feel like I've had the most seamless, like I can't complain about anything. Like, even though it's stressful along every step of the way, it's like I got the first book I queried, I got a book deal with, and I was not waiting as agonizingly long as so many people wait. So I feel like, yeah, I feel very lucky in that
You hit
sense.
the lottery.
The publishing gods have
Yeah, blessed you thoroughly.
yeah, because you hear so many horror stories, and I
Mhm.
did a lot of research before even starting, and so I heard all those horror stories, and I was really expecting it to be brutal, and in some ways it was. It's brutal no matter what, but overall, I know that I had a super easy way through it. But it was the very conventional way of cold querying, um, and stuff like that. I tried doing, but I didn't do well in like Twitter pitch contests
Mhm.
and things like that. So yeah, it was just the conventional cold query and then get really lucky.
That's awesome.
Thank you.
Tell me a little bit about, tell me the story behind the story. Tell me how your current novel or your debut coming soon, by the time we release this, coming soon. When exactly is it coming out? And tell me a little about that.
So my debut is The Good Vampire's Guide to Blood and Boyfriends, and it's a gay vampire rom-com for teens and young adults about a like depressed college student who wakes up and he's turned into a vampire after an accident, and it's just him navigating that new life and struggling to keep the secret. And meanwhile, there's a little bit of mystery from um, there's a girl missing at his school that he's not totally sure he has nothing to do with. Um, and of course, the romance where he has a cute librarian that helps him keep his secret. So there's lots of fun stuff. But as far as like the story behind the story, um, on a personal level, it was a bit about my own sort of struggle with mental health in college. And I don't know if I should be like trigger warning things because the story does have to do a little bit with the aftermath of a suicide attempt.
Mhm.
Um, and so for me, I had my own struggles with mental health in college, and I attempted suicide and survived. And it was kind of a very strange experience, obviously, that you don't I think you see in stories a lot the tragic suicide, right? But you don't see the what happens after and the wanting to the deciding to keep living, basically, like the healing from that. And so that was the story I wanted to tell. So I know it's a rom-com and there's all this dark stuff. So
Mhm.
balancing that was a real struggle, but yeah, at the heart of it, it was wanting to deal with, my own trauma and see that story told. But then also just combined with at the time I was reading Casey McQuiston's Red, White, and Royal Blue had just came out. It was 2019. And I just adored that, like the rom-com, the campiness, the tropiness, the feeling like fan fiction sort of vibes.
Mhm.
Um, and I also read Carry On by Rainbow Rowell, which was such an interesting play on like the Harry Potter story in its own original way. And so I kind of took those things where I was like, I want to do a cool rom-com like Red, White, and Royal Blue. I want to play with like the tropes the way that Carry On did with Harry Potter. I wanted to do that with Twilight and like the era of paranormal romances that I like grew up with. And then of course the soul of the the trauma, mixing those things together is kind of how it happened. Yeah.
Sounds immensely interesting. I can't wait to read.
Thank you.
So tell me about your debut experience so far. Like, how did you get the call? Did he email you first? Did you just call? Like, describe that experience.
Of when I got the offer for the book or from my agent?
Both.
Okay, from my agent, he emailed me. I remember specifically I was driving to New York with with my dad because we have family there. And it's like a 13-hour drive. And I was halfway through and I got the email on my phone from John, who had my book for, I want to say like almost 3 months. So I kind of had written it off.
Mhm.
And he was just saying, I couldn't put it down. And would you have time for a call? And the language he used made it pretty clear, like, oh, this is going to be an offer. Like I was trying to prepare myself for being let down. Like I was like, oh, it could be an R&R, but he sounded very enthusiastic. So it was promising. And then we had the call. That was like on a Thursday, but he said he was busy the rest of the week. Could we do Monday? So it was the most agonizing long weekend ever. Um, and then we hopped on a call and yeah, he just got it. And, I had had some rejections from querying that made it clear that like they didn't like, I don't want to say that any rejection is like they just don't get it, because the rejections can be valid and have good criticism, but I had a few rejections that very clearly didn't get the heart of the book. And he really did, and he loved it and wouldn't have wanted to change that, which some people did want to change things. But yeah, so right off the bat we just clicked, and of course he's got like an amazing reputation and sales history, so there wasn't really a doubt in my mind. Even when I was nudging and seeing if other people would want to offer, I was kind of like, yeah, he's the one. And the book offer was like the last day before Thanksgiving weekend of 2022, it would have been, which feels like ages ago. And yeah, I think I got the email. Well, we had gotten warning that there were bites and that people were interested. So my last response from my agent was that somebody, the first offer that we got, had called him asking some sort of questions and said she was really enthusiastic. And he said, it sounds like she's gearing up to make an offer. So I kind of had that knowledge already before we actually got the offer. And then the second offer that I ended up going with, which is Wednesday Books, they at that same time were saying, we're bringing this to second reads and we love it and we're maybe interested. So then I got the first offer.
Wait a second, real quick.
Yeah.
What editor at Wednesday Books was it?
Vicky Lame, which I know is your editor.
Yeah,
and
okay.
Also
I thought
Vanessa.
that, but I didn't want to say it in case I was wrong.
Yeah.
But I remembered that. Yay, we're editors.
Yeah, we're editor siblings. But I also work with Vanessa Aguirre. They co-adopted me.
How exciting. Okay, continue. I'm sorry.
Yeah. No, you're fine. So the first offer was from Sourcebooks, and that came in, and I was like already like, okay, well, that's the thing. Like, we did it. We sold this book. Whatever happens next, it's going to get published. So that was awesome. And then the Wednesday kind of said, we're standing by. If you're going to do an auction, we're going to participate. Just keep us updated. But they didn't send an offer right off the bat. And again, since this was right before Thanksgiving weekend, they were all willing to wait longer. Like usually you have like 2 weeks-ish or a week-ish to nudge people. But since it was Thanksgiving weekend, they were all really flexible to delay that a little bit. And then we had the auction like a good week and a half later, which again was the most excruciating wait ever at the time. And during that time, we had all sorts of editors bowing out, saying, oh, we either failed at acquisitions or, oh, this was close, but not quite. And then we ended up just having the two come to the auction, but one of them was Wednesday. And I adore them and I adore all their books. And they were kind of a dream imprint for me from the beginning. Oh, sorry, 1 second. Sorry, phone ringing. Okay. And I actually, yeah, when my agent put us on sub, he put together a sub list, and he did have SMP St. Martin's on the list. But I specifically asked, can we add Vicky Lane, because I adore so many of her books, and she also works with adult, and so I liked that I could write in either and theoretically work with her. And so we added her to the list, and she ended up being my editor. So she was a dream editor right from the beginning. And then it was just the bonus of the fact that Vanessa and her would be working together. So it was like 2 editorial brains and 2 different people to work with and to sort of fight for my book in-house. So it just felt like fate, honestly. So again, it felt very lucky.
And how was that call? Was it on Zoom?
Yeah, so we had the auction, and that was all over email. But then after we accepted, I had my first meeting with both the editors. Or no, I did have one beforehand, before the auction, once they knew that they were going to participate, and once I was still deciding between the people. Yeah, I had a call with the editors on both offering sides, and that was Zoom. And
how did that go? Were you nervous? Were you excited?
I was not really nervous. I was so just excited because I was like, at this point, I knew that I had 2 offers, and I was just pleased as punch. Like, I couldn't really complain. And in hindsight, I wish I'd asked so many more questions. Like, I wish I knew what to ask, because then like the couple months between now and then, it's like I've thought of all these different things as far as what does Wednesday do to promote their authors, and how they treat debuts and how they treat second books and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
But I just didn't ask anything because I was just so excited to be there. I was just like, I love that you guys offered. They love the book, so what could go wrong? So I think I was a little bit cotton candy glasses because I was just so excited. So no, I didn't really ask, but they just talked about what they loved about the book, and obviously it meant a lot to me. And um they mentioned there were a couple things they mentioned that did like also sell me on them, which is that they mentioned we want to get sensitivity readers on this, and I said, yeah, absolutely, I would really want to do that as well. So I was glad that they proactively mentioned that. um and they were also more specific about their editorial vision than the other editor was.
Mm-hmm.
Like the things that they said they wanted to change were small, but like I knew that it needed, and I trusted their guidance on it. And yeah, it all just resonated really well. So I was very excited.
When I had my call with Vicky, I froze and I was really shocked with myself because like I interview people all the time and like I
Yeah,
you like some famous writers, some celebrities and stuff too.
yeah,
I never froze before. But because this is like a dream,
right.
and then you're like in my head, I was way too in my head because in my head I'm thinking she has the power to give me this book, to give me this dream, or to take it. And I
Yeah,
froze like a deer in headlights for like the first couple of minutes.
yeah. Because it feels like this is the person who has the power to change your whole life, right? Or like to get you
Or not
started in your
if they don't like
career.
you.
Or not, right?
So I froze completely for like 3 minutes. But you know, she was gracious and wonderful and
Yeah.
all that good stuff. And
Yeah,
that's
no, I feel you. The call was just a blur to me because I'm like, I'm sure they asked me questions, but I just remember being just like, I'm so happy to be here. Like, it doesn't even matter. It was just floating through. Um,
Hey, JD Myall here. Thanks for supporting the show. Today's episode was brought to you by my debut novel, Heart's Gambit, coming to bookstores in February of 2026. 2 time-traveling Black families, 1 cursed magical duel, and the pair of star-crossed lovers who just might break the cycle if they don't break each other first. If you like the love and time travel of Outlander mixed with the magic of the night circus, don't worry, Heart's Gambit is coming soon. In the meantime, please support today's guest by running out and buying their book. Thanks for supporting the show. Now, let's get chatty as Craft Chat Chronicles continues. So how far in are you? Have you gotten a lot of editorial notes from her back yet, or?
yeah, so we sold in 2022, and originally they talked about putting me in summer 2024, but then that was just when we were like originally talking about the offer.
Mm-hmm.
And then very quickly we were like, okay, no, we're going to do January 2025. And then just recently I got pushed to August 2025. So I've been done with all of my edits except for copy edits for like a year now.
That's awesome.
So we did 2 rounds of developmental edits, 2 rounds of line edits.
Mm-hmm.
And we're doing copy edits theoretically August, September of this year.
Mm-hmm.
Much later once we're kicking off production. So I'm basically through with the bulk of the editing. It's just the production side stuff that's going to start happening soon. And we just started having conversations. Like they just asked me my thoughts and if I had any mood boards and things like that. So my background's in graphic design. So of course I made like a full slide deck and had all sorts of opinions.
Oh, how cool.
But no, that's really the most exciting part. I think it'll start feeling really real once there's an actual cover and like, because that's like the product version, like the manifestation of what the book is. So it's very, yeah.
And the long runway is good because then that gives you more time to work on the stuff you want to do as far as like your own marketing or,
Yeah.
everything ready to go.
Yeah, and every time I've been moved, they've told me it's because they want to do more things and have more time
Mhm.
to do outreach, which like I don't know how true that is or if they're just trying to like appease the author. But I like to believe that it's true and that it is about giving the book the best shot, you know?
Mhm. So going into this, what do you think? What do you wish you would have known as like a brand new debut, just getting the offer on day one, like for people who will see this and they just took that call today?
Yeah. Um, I think just like when you're on sub and your pre-debut, pre-first book deal, you're really like, I feel like you're a little bit desperate for anything and you really need some like, what's the word? Just your that validation that you're doing a good job and that you are a good writer and it's worth chasing. That I think sometimes people accept deals or accept working with somebody that they're not sold on
Mhm.
because they just want to get their foot in the door. And I know it's like so I can't say like to say no to things totally because it's like that can be such a privileged thing because what if I don't know people's financials and I don't know what they're doing. But I think there's always another book and you need to be with somebody you trust to fight for your book and with a publisher who's going to do right by your book.
Mhm.
And yeah, and I think that determines your process completely. And I don't know. I guess not being afraid to fight for yourself and know what's right for your book and who you're going to trust with it. Um, like I got lucky that both of the offers that I had were people that I felt like would do a good job.
Mhm.
Um, and especially where I ended up, I like really trusted them. But I've heard just so many sub stories of like people getting these really like lowball offers or like offers that won't budge on anything or editorial visions that don't align and they're just so desperate for the book deal that they'll take anything. And I get that because money and publishing and everything. But yeah, you have to know your worth and you have to fight for your book because there's going to be other books too that you'll yeah, I don't know. Sorry.
You're good. So you mentioned money. How long did it take you to get your check on signing
Oh
and your
gosh.
contract and all that?
Forever. My contract took like 5 months or 6 months, which isn't even the longest I've had to wait for contracts. The international ones have been crazy.
Mhm.
Um, so it was about 5 months to get the contract, and then a month after signing, I got paid. So
Mhm.
6 months. But I got laid off from my job right around the time that
Mhm.
I was getting paid. So I kind of launched into doing the mostly full-time author thing
Mhm.
on accident. And then I got my agent came to me with an IP project.
They have announced the novel now, so I can excitedly share with you that the IP project that she keeps referring to is a Stranger Things novel. She's been asked to write a novel for the Stranger Things franchise. Yay! So that's what she's talking about when she says IP
That
project.
really I was excited about. And so that kind of validated the full-time author thing, but I don't know how long it's going to continue to work because the juggling advances is hard. Um, and I'm currently on my parents' insurance, but that won't be the case next year. So there's just lots of like adulty things that it's very hard to make it work as a full-time author, especially when you're early career and you don't have like, I don't know, ideally royalties coming in at some point. But
What prompted you to do the debut group?
um, so like I said, I got my book deal quite early compared to most 2025 people. And so I was in the 2024 group on
Mhm.
Slack, and I knew that those kind of groups could be super helpful. And there was, like I said, there wasn't a 2025 group yet. And I knew like just a couple of authors on Discord who also had 2025 deals and wanted to have a group.
Mhm.
And it was also kind of like the control freak in me being like, well, if I take the lead, then I can have control over certain aspects. Like I hated that the 2024 group was on Slack because unless you pay for Slack, it
Mhm.
erases your messages after 90 days, which makes it impossible to use as like a resource.
Mhm.
Um, or like a depository of knowledge, which is what I think the debut groups are best for, is sharing resources and being able to search certain things.
Mhm.
So I was like, I want this group to be a Discord, and if I have to do it myself to make that happen, then I
Mhm.
will do that. Um, and there's and yeah, so I just started it with a small group of people, and then as more people joined, I asked other mods to help. And then this is no shade to the 2024 group, because the mods have done so much, especially recently, but before the whole Kate Corain incident of the
Mhm.
2024 debut scandal, there wasn't a lot of moderation going on, or like um skimming to make sure there's not like bots or like lurkers and things like that.
Catch me up. What was the scandal?
Uh are you familiar with Kate Corain at all?
I don't remember.
She was the
Is
author
that
who was
like the
like
bad author friend thing, or was that something else?
similar, but no.
Okay.
She was review bombing her other authors on Goodreads, making like fake accounts, like dozens and dozens of fake accounts to one star her competitors' books,
Wow.
primarily
Terrible.
marginalized authors, and people of color. And she's this, and yeah, no, it was a mess. And she was in the
Terrible.
2024 group, and a whole lot of drama went down in that group once that was uncovered.
Mm-hmm.
And just as a person who's moderated discords before and like done some community management, that's like my nightmare. And I was like, we have to make sure that like those things don't happen, and also that we have people who we have moderators that we trust who can jump on things like that if they do happen. um so yeah, so that's just how the discord grew into being more like sort of we're being more careful about making sure everybody posts in the directory and they can be like a verified person, even if they're not posting super often, just like having that small requirement to make sure that there's no bots and lurkers.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then, of course, just having our little mod team who are checking the Discord regularly and making sure like there's no shitstorms brewing, basically. Um, so that's been really awesome. I don't like we're not like leaders of the 2025 debuts overall. We're just in charge of the Discord, but um I've been helping with some of the design stuff too. And yeah, it's nice to have a little community because we're all going to go crazy during debut year. So we might as well do it together, right?
Exactly. 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 Are you at? Where are you based at? Like what state?
I'm in Louisville, Kentucky.
I
Awesome.
used to live in Fort Campbell, Kentucky when I was a kid.
Okay.
I was
Yeah.
Army brat, so I was somewhere everywhere.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Do you have a lot of plans or any plans yet for what you're going to do as far as marketing and stuff like that in your debut?
I have all sorts of brainstorming type things, but I don't have anything solid. I really want to see what my publishers are planning and sort of figure out how I can augment that the best I can. I know I want to start a newsletter. I haven't yet, and I
Mhm.
need to. And I also, and this might change what with politics and current agenda things, but I was going to dedicate myself to TikTok because I actually have fun with it, honestly. And um, I think that's where a lot of the readers are. But we'll see how that goes. But yeah, and I would love to do like a pre-order campaign just to have some little extra goodies that I can like reward people who like it's mostly going to be my friends and family pre-ordering, I feel like, but just to give a little bonus something. Um, but yeah, it's going to come down to like I wonder what my publisher is going to do and what I'll have to do to augment that.
I just had a really cool idea if you're game.
Sure.
Said you're good at TikTok and you like TikTok. What if we made a TikTok for the 2025 debuts and then
Oh, I think there definitely should be, but I
yeah,
don't think I'm the person to do that. Um,
okay. I'm definitely not.
I
I'm not even on TikTok. I'm not savvy enough to do either
Yeah,
one.
like I have fun with it a little bit, but I also haven't posted in months, so like the consistency is not a thing for me.
Uh-huh.
Um, but no, I know that there's like a little social committee squad that
Mhm.
have been talking about things, so hopefully
Mhm.
people will divide and conquer the different channels and t do some good stuff there.
Bring that
Because
up to them if somebody mentions it, and then maybe everybody could like make little, video montage or little things about their launch, and then we could share them on the
yeah,
channel and then cross promote each other.
yeah,
Yeah. Tell me a little bit about writing an IP. How's that been different?
Um, it's been really fun. So it helps that this was a franchise that I'm like a huge fan of already.
Mhm.
And I'm also like a person who writes fan fiction. So to me, working in somebody else's like playground is kind of familiar. Um, but it's also just been interesting. You're not just writing with your own vision anymore. You're writing with these different stakeholders in mind.
Mhm.
Um, and beyond just your editor and the publisher, there's the the show's creative team, and then the
The fans' expectations.
owners of them
Mhm.
have different, more business oriented approaches than the creative team does, which is different from what the publisher might have. So juggling all the different perspectives, and then also, of course, thinking about what the fans are going to say
Mhm.
in the future, but you don't really have their input right now. So there's a lot of thinking about the different stakeholders and how to, you know, thread that needle of appeasing everybody's different views and goals. Um, so yeah, that's been a challenge, but really fun. Um, but no, for me, it was just a lot of fun because it was, like I said, a world that I just loved. So it felt like it felt like just a nerdy, amazing opportunity for me.
And the intellectual property company, they reached out to your agent to have you write the idea, or did you guys collab on an outline for you to write the idea? How did that part work?
So my agent already worked with this property with another one of their authors. And
Mhm.
so what happened was I met my agent for lunch in New York a while ago when I was visiting, and I ended up geeking out about this property for a
Mhm.
while of the lunch. And he was just like, I work with them, right? Like I helped them do their books. And I was like,
Mhm.
give me like put me in, coach. No, but I just said, like, if there's ever the opportunity, yeah, I would love that.
Mhm.
And it was like a bunch of months later, he was like, hey, remember that conversation we had? I've been working dark magic and we might have this job for you. Would you be able to work under these tight constraints of this many words in this short period,
Mhm.
um and for this much money? And
What's the short period?
uh originally it was going to be like a month for 60,000 words. I ended up having like 6 weeks,
Mhm.
which I somehow did really well, and just I had my outline and I did my like daily word count, and I was really focused, and it was an awesome, super fun writing process actually, but I definitely couldn't do that normally or regularly.
Now, do
uh,
they give you the whole outline or do you collaborate on it? Because I've heard different things with
they
different
gave
ideas.
very little.
Mhm.
They gave a very broad view of things that of like they gave like one or two things that we shouldn't touch. And then
Mhm.
we sent a bunch of pitches, and that brought up a whole lot of other things that we shouldn't touch.
Mhm.
Kind of like we didn't really know the guardrails until we were bumping into them. Um, and then eventually we narrowed it down to ideas that we could use, and I wrote the whole I mean I outlined it myself, and
Mhm.
the story was still very much mine. It was just using the character of that and their world and trying to think of their different perspectives of not wanting to play too hard on this relationship and not wanting to um, break the canon of where it lays between seasons and things like that. Um, but I lost my train of thought. But yeah.
Sorry, that's rude. I love that. I love that. I love that. And I'm wondering, you can be in the ballpark, or you cannot answer this at all if you don't want to.
Okay.
I'm just wondering for my own curiosity, what was the pay like? Did they pay good on this particular property?
Um.
Were you
So
turning
for
a cartwheel?
for me, I think it's good. I don't know. I mean, they didn't say I wasn't allowed to talk about the pay, so
Okay.
I feel like I probably am. Um, the main thing is that this was an I mean, this is the case for most IP, but not all IP. But for most IP, you don't keep the copyright.
Mhm.
Um, and this was specifically work for hire.
Mhm.
Um, so I was a contractor
Mhm.
hired for this one story, and that's it. And I don't get royalties. It's a one-time fee, basically.
Mhm.
And it's $32,000 for 60,000 words, which for me, it was great because, like I said, I had just gotten laid off from my job when I got my first book deal. So this was the opportunity that I was like, okay, we can make this full-time writer thing work.
Mhm.
And it was also ultimately about three months of work, of actual work. So $30,000 for me was awesome. But I'm sure money things vary drastically depending on properties and stuff like that. They were also very strict. They wouldn't write in like bonuses into the contract or anything. So there was no like, if you hit this amount of sales, it was really just that flat fee.
That's because it's such a big property. They know the fans will likely buy it and you'll likely hit this.
Right.
Would be my guess. They probably.
No, I'm guessing they just, I get it because for IP, most of the time, people are buying it because it's the property. They're not buying it for the author or
Mhm.
even the story. And hopefully they like the story and the story is good and that inspires more people to buy it. But most people are buying it for that franchise name.
Mhm.
So I get that the author isn't necessarily the most important part of this process, even though they are the product, the book is the product that you're selling.
Mhm.
So it's a strange little business world, I guess.
Mhm. Very true, very true. Awesome, awesome. All right, so I'm going to ask you some craft questions now. Let's see. What do you consider the core elements of a successful novel?
Mm. Hmm. I think that depends hugely on genre because, obviously what makes a romance novel effective is different from like a sci-fi or something. So I think in some ways it's about, yeah, about meeting that genre and meeting the reader's expectations of what that genre includes, but then putting your spin on it and making it different in all those fun ways that you can. So I think at the core, though, it's always going to come down to character and having a character that not necessarily I don't love the advice that it has to be someone you can root for. It has to be someone you relate to. Because I think there can be really interesting characters that go outside that you don't relate to and that you don't necessarily root for. Like when you're having like I think of like a Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, like you're not supposed to like Coriolanus, but
Mhm.
you do sometimes root for him, or you still love him as a protagonist. Um even in that sense. So I think, yeah, just having a character that's dynamic and capable of change and that feels really real and authentic and like they have something true or interesting to say. And for me, and this might be leaning more like of the rom-com and tropiness, I think I
Mhm.
love an element of like over the topness of like the characters doing things that you would never really do in real life, but you dream of doing, like like getting really mad and instead of just doing, you actually blow up or throw punches or break something.
Mhm.
Um, just those like larger than life sort of moments, I think bring something to life. So,
What makes a good first page?
ooh, it's just the hook. I mean, you have to, but the hook can be so many different things. So really just giving somebody reason to keep reading. And usually I would say that comes back to character as well,
Mhm.
as far as like giving us somebody that we want to see more from them. We want to see what they do about whatever situation they've been put in. Um, because we think that they're interesting or we think that they're going to react in some special way that is maybe over the top or not what we'd see every day. So yeah, I think interesting people in interesting situations and just giving people interesting questions that make them want to flip the page.
Love that answer. And how do you avoid the saggy middle?
Ooh. Um, I don't know. I think the biggest thing is having like a super solid structural midpoint. Like I love Save the Cat and everything, and they have a real emphasis on the midpoint turn as like there's some sort of revelation that makes your character rethink kind of everything they've known, or they're having like a mirror moment where they're looking at themselves and like who they could be if they change or if they keep on going themselves. So I think both from a character arc perspective and from like the plot perspective, having a solid midpoint where like things really pivot or are forced to confront themselves in that way, that like really helps. And that's kind of the tent pole that holds up the middle with everything else. And then I think really kind of, I don't know, like geometrically, like what do I say? I think really, really structurally about plot. And so I'll like have my percentages, and you break up the middle chunk, which is the 50% in the middle, into your half, and then a half of that half. And then there's key points that happen at those different those different beats. So for me, it's all like a little bit mathematical of breaking things down like that. But just like, yeah, adding in those little tent poles that are, and of those main key points of tension that are going to hold up the middle parts, if that makes any sense.
It does. And you know what I love about doing this?
Yeah.
I can ask the same question to 50 people and everybody's response is different. Like I've never heard anybody refer to it as mathematical before you, but it's brilliant and I get it. Like I'm seeing the 50% when you're describing the 50%. So
Yeah. It's like architecture, like a bridge. You have to have those the things that keep everything connected in their way.
how do you approach and endings for your stories?
Resolutions, endings. Yeah, I think if you've done a good job with the beginning and middle, the ending can feel really natural, the way it comes together and the way that you're forcing the character to like confront choices and confront the different outcomes of who they could be, basically. But for me, I don't always draft clean enough to where it comes together all like that. So I'll be at the end and I'll realize like, oh, we needed to thread something through in order to make this work to its optimal way. So usually by the time I get to the ending, I have to do a fair bit of revision before I actually write the end, which is a weird. I know they say don't edit as you go, but I'm usually like, don't edit until you reach the 75% mark, and then you can change everything before you write the last bit. But that's just what works for me. But as for what makes it good, I think, again, coming back to character, it's fulfilling that arc and seeing, who they are now versus who they were in the beginning. And that's, again, sort of a save the cat thing of the opening image versus the closing image, as these mirror points at the tail ends of your story of seeing, very visually, ideally, like how they've changed or transformed as a character. So that's a huge thing. And then I think just always wanting to go out with a bang. I mean, the climax is the climax for a reason. So you don't want it to ever fall flat compared to the other parts of your story. So I think that also goes back to the over the topness that I love in stories, and kind of that dramaticness of, don't be afraid to make it larger than life. And yeah, I think just making things big and fun, even when it's something terrible happening, it still feels fun. I don't know.
And what elements do you think are helpful for people who are trying to write a killer rom-com like you?
I mean, the chemistry is essential to any rom-com, and it's not always something that feels like learnable or teachable. I mean, you have to read a lot of good banter and and watch a lot of it and consume that to sort of learn the rhythm of it. But just showing the characters are better off together, like that they're strong individually, but the way they work together like just makes them stronger and more interesting and more themselves. So yeah, I think, again, coming back to character, always it's about them being these individuals who are capable of change, and they push each other in the right direction. And a huge thing for me is, and this is ironic coming from a person who's like writing the suicide rom-com, is that you have to have the calm in the rom. Like, I think I see a lot of rom-coms nowadays that aren't that funny, and it's so disappointing, or it's just kind of, or they're like, it's women's fiction branded as a rom-com or something like that. So I think the comedy aspect is just like not being afraid to poke fun at your characters and at yourself and at the tropes you're using. There's like an element of self-awareness that I think is always funny. Like for me with the tropiness and the vampires, I really leaned into the self-awareness of the genre. Um, and again, over the topness for comedy, just these absurd things or like things that people wouldn't say or that you don't think people would say or that you'd only say on the internet or to your best friend, but they're just saying them to whoever. So um yeah, having those two key elements, the rom and the com, and using them both to show that the characters need to end up together. That because that's like the main thing. If readers aren't rooting for your characters to be together forever, then you've kind of failed with a romance.
What do you think you did right that helped you make it and become a published author?
I think one was like on the publishing side, I really researched publishing a lot before I ever sent a query. And like I was familiar with the different do's and don'ts and the etiquette. I mean, there's only so much you always have access to because there's like whisper network stuff. Like once you're in it, there's things that you hear that you don't necessarily hear if you're on the outside. But doing as much research as you can that's available, because there is a lot available nowadays on the internet about the etiquette and about how to publish and the realities of how it is and how difficult it is and how emotionally taxing it can be.
Mm-hmm.
Just so you're prepared for that. And then on a craft level, I think it was just like really focusing on learning the right rhythm to a book. Like for me, learning story structure was essential. I keep mentioning Save the Cat, but just like all sorts of story structure stuff I geek out about. But that was essential to me. And just reading a lot about like character arcs and the different structural and parts of storytelling, and really like trying to heighten all of them and improve. Because when I was a younger writer, I mean, like there's always a part where you like start a hobby or a new thing and your taste, the things that you like, is like way better than the things you're capable of. And I knew that. I was never like the the overconfident writer who was like shoving terrible things into people's faces to read. Like I was very afraid to share my work because I knew, like from a critical eye, I was like, this isn't as good as the things I read. And so really dedicating myself to, I want to write something that's as good or better, ideally even, than some of my favorite books, and like pushing myself to learn the craft and dedicate my time to it and work on one project long enough to work in all those things. So yeah, sticking with the Good Vampire and revising it, I mean, that took a full rewrite and then a bunch of revisions before I ever sent it to an agent. So I think, yeah, just doing your research both on the craft and the publishing aspect and putting in that work, I think, is essential. That's not like the only thing you need, because you always need a whole lot of luck. Like no matter what, like I recognize that there are so many talented people who have put in that work who still aren't able to get their foot in the door because publishing's a mess. But those are, I think, some things that can give you the best shot.
And sometimes people can have all the talent in the world, but they don't really know the market and they don't know what's selling at the moment. That was honestly what impressed me the most about your blurb, because the story sounded incredibly entertaining. But I was like, ooh, that's like really high concept. Like,
yeah, the idea of high concept too, and just like the pitchableness of a story is so essential, where if you can't distill it down to, like when I say gay vampire rom-com, people light up. And that's not super in-depth about what the story's about, but it gives a very broad picture in just a very few words, which I think is what you're always going for with pitches.
And I lit up because, like, one of my pet peeves as like a writer and a studier of publishing is that people are always saying like certain trends are over or they're done or this, that, and the third. But there's so many
Vampires are never over.
Not only is it never over, but there's so many trends that people who are in like marginalized groups haven't even got to explore yet. So it's like super unfair to say that something's done when everybody hasn't had the chance to participate.
Yeah.
When you pitched that, when I heard that, I'm like, I've never heard of a gay vampire, rom-com. That's dope. Like, that's really
Thank
cool.
you.
I've never heard of that before.
Yeah. Yeah. I
Yeah.
would say a few years ago, a lot of publishing would have said that vampires are dead and that they wouldn't do it. But I do think there have been a couple examples recently of they're willing to give it a shot for those like
Yeah.
marginalized voices who haven't been able to tell their vampire stories before. Like there's gay vampires, there's black vampires, there's everybody getting their shot at vampire stories, which I love because nothing what's more timeless than vampires, you know?
Exactly. That book, Vampires Never Get Old, if you ever get a chance to
Yeah.
that was pretty cool. And it was the same thing. They see vampires and all kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And it's like a short story collection.
Yeah. Ooh.
I love it. I love it. And I heard somebody say that before. They were like, vampires are over. I'm like, how can they be over if we haven't got to the party?
Yeah. Yeah.
Everybody needs to be able to write
Yeah.
vampires. So you mentioned your chat with your agent in Manhattan. That made me wonder, what's your author agent relationship like? By that I mean, like, do you bring them story ideas and they tell you which ones they think would be, more marketable, or do you go to them with the whole book? Or, you know, like, how does that work generally? What do you guys chat about?
Yeah.
You chat about what's hot? Like,
Yeah. Yeah. I usually I make pretty like formal little pitch sheets. I'll have like a mood board and then like a query like blurb synopsis. Like just a one page sort of couple hundred words. This is the pitch and the hook, and this is what the character wants, and this is what they're struggling with. And I will do that for like 2 or 3 stories that I'm kind of noodling on. And I'll send that to my agent and be like, do you feel like one of these is easier to sell than the other? Like I'm open to everything, but I want to hear your insight. And for the most part, he's like, you should work on what you feel passionate about, and I'll figure out how to put that in the market. But there's been like one, yeah, I think literally just one thing where it was more like sci-fi dystopian, and he was like, that's a really hard thing to do in YA right now. So if you could age it up to adult maybe, or we can table that for later when maybe YA dystopian is less of a no-go.
how long
So
ago was that? Because I thought dystopian was coming back. Maybe I'm.
I think it is coming. People are saying it's coming back around now, but this was like a year ago or almost maybe 2 years ago. This was right after I sold the first one. So that was 2022. So,
Okay.
um, but yeah, it was very sci-fi, futuristic weirdness. It would be fun and I would revisit it, but the book that I'm working on now is Dragons and Romantasy, which is obviously quite trendy. Um, so both he and my publishers were excited about that. Um, but yeah, as far as working with my agent, he's really flexible as far as like if I want to send him the whole book or if I want to send him the pitches, like whatever I want to do, he'll work with me. But for me, it does help to get feedback on the concept level before I dive into something totally.
Love that. Love that. Is there anything you wanted to share with aspiring writers or readers or just in general that you wanted to share?
Mm. Oh, that's so broad.
We'll go aspiring writers then. Anything you want to share with aspiring writers?
Yeah, I think the story is the thing, is always going to be the thing. That's the one, like there's so much you can't control in publishing, but what you can control is the stuff on the page, the thing that you're writing about and how you're writing it. And that's what you have to come back to, I think, always, because, when you're querying or on submission, or even when you have a book deal, there's all the different stresses, all the different things you have no control over, and so many things to overthink about, but you have to always be working on the next thing, or you'll drive yourself crazy. And I know because I've been driving myself crazy. So I'm trying to get focused on the next thing is hard if you wait too long, I think sometimes. But yeah, I think just really focusing on the writing and being the best writer you can be, because the industry stuff is so out of your control. You can equip yourself with the knowledge you need to navigate it, but you can't always necessarily like change the terrible truths about publishing. if that makes sense.
It does. When you get your headshots and when you get your cover, send those to me. Again, it's not a rush because, like I said, I'm not putting this out right away.
Yeah, I do. I'll send you the photos. I did just get those like last month. So,
Oh yeah, okay.
And then the cover seems like, I mean, we just started talking about it, so hopefully it'll be within the next couple months, but it could be anything.
I'm excited.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you. How can people connect with you?
The main thing I would say, just go to jamiedamato.com, JAMIEDAMATO.com, and that will have a link to all my socials. My book, you can't pre-order it yet, but it's on Goodreads. You can add to your want to read. But yeah, if you go to my website, that'll have my socials. I'm on TikTok, Instagram, Twitter. I'm not active basically anywhere, but I pop up occasionally.
Thank you so much. I enjoyed you, Jamie. Let me
Yeah, thank you.
turn this off.
That wraps up today's Craft Chat Chronicles with JD Myall. Thanks for joining us. If you liked the episode, please comment, subscribe, and share.